but here's the thing. I
Yeah.
made the plan, and now that I've realized kind of where we are at, I have decided to take another year off. Welcome to the Sunday Reset. My name is Jen.
My name's Jill.
And today we are talking about our money moves, including some Roth IRA contributions, our meal plan, and then a little bit about HELOCs and home equity loans.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's start with our weekly money move.
moves.
Yes. So for me, I actually did some retirement replanning.
Yes.
Yeah.
What did that include?
So as many of you will know, if you listen to the show, I have not been contributing to my retirement, either of our retirements, for the past year. It has been now a full year. So I was like, okay, we took the year off. Let's see what we need now moving forward to reach our retirement goals.
Yeah.
So I used a few calculators to kind of see what we might need. And I came up with a new plan, and it's definitely not maxing out. But here's the thing. At this point, we actually don't need to max out.
I love that.
If we didn't invest anything else, we would be at 1.6 million when we retire at 65.
Okay.
So we don't need to.
Yeah.
But that would give us a much smaller, for two people, potentially kids, like the things we want to do, that would give us a much tighter budget.
Yeah. It's so cool. It's really the power of investing early.
Yes.
And regularly and prioritizing that as much as possible. Even if it doesn't mean that you can max it out when you're younger, something is better than nothing. But certainly it's a really great goal when you're younger, because it now allows you this flexibility now that you are homeowners and have multiple kids, that you have the ability to ebb and flow with it.
So, but here's the thing. I made the plan. And now that I've realized kind of where we are at, I have decided to take another year off.
Whoa.
Yeah. Because the budget is still tight, and we've just taken on some new expenses. And in 1 year, Atlas will be done with daycare.
Yeah.
So we'll have that money.
Oh, cool.
So we will invest that money. So right now that money is tied to daycare. Once that money is no longer tied to daycare, it'll just go straight into our retirement accounts.
What platform, or is there a specific calculator that you use to be able to estimate what you'll have in retirement based on what's already there? Does it just
I love to use
Vanguard, or?
Empower.
Okay.
So Empower it's a free tool. It used to be Personal Capital. It will take into consideration all of your accounts. Also, like when you want to retire, when you want to start taking out Social Security, because you can choose to delay it. So that is what I like to use to get like a really clear, as clear as possible. We don't know what the returns will be. I like to use 7%. Most calculators will just conservatively put you at 6%. So it'll make you think you need to save a lot more than you actually do. So I like to use Empower, but I used a couple different calculators yesterday just because I haven't looked at it in a while. So I wanted to like really play around.
Cool. And we'll link to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, we'll link to Empower. And so but I did make a $100 contribution to my IRA.
For 2024?
Yeah.
Amazing. So what kind of difference do you think that's going to make?
I don't know, but when we say every little bit counts, I truly believe that. So there is also the possibility, like in a month, Atlas's daycare tuition actually drops by $50 a week. So I'm also considering putting that money maybe into retirement. But like I said, we've just incurred some new monthly costs. So I may need to just move it over there.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay. Exciting.
Yes.
And you've got a plan for it and good knowledge of what retirement will look like. So
yeah,
that's awesome. For me, I made some money with a little low effort side hustle. Can you call it a side
Yeah.
hustle? So we've talked in the past about how you, Jen, do Airbnb, but the specific area that we live in, even though we're only like 15 minutes away from each other, it is illegal to do Airbnb where we live. And while we kind
Doesn't
of
stop some people.
does it doesn't.
It
No.
doesn't.
But there are some people out there trying to find you and get you shut down and give you a fine of $500 per day if you continue on with it. And that's really terrifying to me, even though we did build out a part of our home to be an Airbnb. Once we got finished with it, we kind of learned all the laws around it and the ramifications of moving forward. We just didn't feel comfortable. However, that doesn't mean that we can't make money off of our space and that there aren't alternatives. And so in the past, we had also rented out RV parking on our property. There's no limitations on that within St. Pete.
Mhm.
We're not doing that anymore, but what we are doing is utilizing a platform called Peerspace. We're not sponsored by them, but they are similar to Airbnb and kind of how they function, only it's renting out spaces by the hour. So there's three different categories that you can rent out your space on Peerspace. I have our home listed for all three categories: meetings, media, or events. So it could be that a small company rents out the house to do kind of an off-site quarterly or annual meeting with their team. It could be that somebody wants to host a party. It could be that somebody wants to shoot a commercial. We've had all those types of inquiries for our place. So far, we've primarily booked it for parties, just people who, rather than renting out a restaurant or some sort of hall, they are choosing, a home that's not their home so they can have the party there, clean up a little bit, but then skedaddle.
Mhm.
So that's what happened this past weekend. Someone rented it out to do an event for her real estate business. And she had, about 15 people in the house, and kind of like a fun event where they were painting and making flower arrangements and that kind of a thing. So we rented it out for 3.5 hours. The really beautiful thing about Peerspace in this situation is that you charge per hour. So while we don't have as many bookings as probably we could get if we were doing Airbnb, we make a lot more off of it than we would even on an overnight stay. So that's been really great. We've had a couple of bookings so far. They've all gone really well, even as far as like not things aren't broken, things aren't ruined, things aren't destroyed. And I think that's partially because it's just a couple of hours that people are there.
Mhm.
But we also have the benefit of Peerspace kind of helping to back you if something does go wrong. But that happened this weekend, and it was, a few hundred extra dollars into our bank account, which is so exciting.
Yeah. And I will say for Peerspace or Airbnb, because you were saying your guest kind of took a little bit of advantage of the time
Mhm.
constriction. Um, in my experience, after like years and years of hosting Airbnb, you have to be firm with your boundaries. So there's a check-in, a checkout, there's house rules,
Mhm.
if there time limits, like
Yeah.
you have to be very not rigid, but you have to set clear boundaries. And if somebody asks for a little lenience
Mhm.
on those boundaries, I will if it doesn't if it's no imposition on me. So like our current guest asked to check in a little early on her check-in day. We had nobody checking out. The place was already clean. That was no skin off my back to let
Mhm.
her in there early. If she had a second request,
Mhm.
even if that request was like no skin off my back, it would be a no. Because I don't want that person to think that I'm like a pushover and I'm going to say yes every
That
time.
lenience,
Second
yeah.
one always has to be a no, just to set that boundary.
Yeah.
So that is a tip. But yeah, that's a great and Peerspace is also like a more affordable if you're hosting an event. It's
Mhm.
more affordable than
Yeah.
other places.
It,
So
I
that's an
didn't
idea.
know about it either. It's certainly something that I might utilize to be able to book an event like a baby shower or something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
Someone was even going to use our house to get ready for their wedding, before, getting married on the beach, that
Mhm.
kind of a thing. So all sorts of creative ways that we can utilize our homes, rent out our spaces. And for me, it just included cleaning up, and I don't give access to the bedrooms. So I was able to just lock anything away into the bedroom. I don't have to completely clear out the fridge. Like, it's really low effort on my part. And I just leave for a couple of
Yeah.
hours. So that was fun.
Yeah.
All right. What did we eat this week?
Yum. Okay. So this week for me was chaos.
Hmm.
So it was not a lot of cooking.
I'm with you.
It was a lot of just get it on the table and more takeout than I would like to admit. But
But we're here to say we're not perfect and to help you find your own permission to not be
yes.
perfect.
So I did make one recipe that I can link to. We did Publix, if you know, you know. We did, subs. I got an Italian one. It was on sale, $7 for a whole. So that was, my dinner and lunch the next day. And then there was a sale on frozen pizzas, 2 for $6, or like 2 for $12, so $6 each. So last night was pizzas, and that was great. It's much less expensive to do the frozen pizzas than it is to order pizzas in.
Well, that's what I was going to say is even though these are pre-made meals, it's still less expensive than even takeout would have
Hmm.
been. Takeout's less expensive than a sit-down restaurant would have been. So you're still winning in
Yeah,
allowing yourself some convenience.
right. So that was my radical middle.
Mhm.
I didn't want to
Mhm.
do takeout every day, but I also didn't have the energy to cook. So we got this. But I did cook one thing. I had some wild rice that I've had in the cabinet for a while, and I wanted to finally use it. So I just did a one pan chicken and wild rice dish, and it
Cool.
turned out pretty good. It was just all in one 9 by 13 pan. Cover it. I think I'm out of aluminum foil, or
Oh.
maybe I just can't find it because that's the state my life is in right now. But instead of letting it deter me, I actually used the Silpat that I use for my baking sheets. I use it on the bottom of my
Oh,
baking sheet.
nice. Yeah.
So instead of using aluminum foil, I just put the Silpat over the baking dish. It worked the same.
No way.
Way
So
so fine. So I don't
now
even
your
need
hack
foil.
helps you realize you don't even need it.
Yeah.
Probably healthier too
Yeah.
than cooking with foil.
So I put the Silpat over it and baked it, and it was great. And I used chicken breasts. I think the recipe called for chicken thighs,
Yeah.
which is sometimes dangerous because you can cook chicken thighs longer and they're still juicy. Chicken breasts will dry out sooner.
Yeah.
But this, I think, because no moisture was getting out of that Silpat, it was fine. The chicken breast was fine in there. Even
Amazing.
and especially because the wild rice takes longer than white rice.
Yeah.
So I was worried, but it was fine.
Wild rice, it feels like, had a heyday back in the early 2000s. It just everything was wild rice. And where did it go? You're bringing it back.
I don't know
Is
if I'm
that the
bringing
next
it
is that
back.
the next glow up? Wild rice?
I still prefer white rice.
Okay.
That's why I haven't used the wild rice.
That's why you had to use it up.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, for me, real talk and vulnerability is same. Crazy week. But also, I'm not going to pretend to be anything that I am not. My mother-in-law is in town, along with my father-in-law. They're both in town.
They're both here. But Linda is the
But
real star of the show.
Linda. So they live in an RV and they come down a couple times a year, and we call it our back alley bistro because Linda cooks very well and very often. So I have not done a lot of cooking this week, and you'll probably hear the same thing from me next week, but I still want to come ready for you all with some recipes.
But does Linda even have recipes like online to share?
That's the thing. She actually does follow recipes sometimes. Now, here's the thing. She has Shuha read this to the top.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Right?
saying. Like,
She's maybe never ever followed the rules. She's absolutely broken the rules and now she's at a place of transcendence. But she utilizes recipes for inspiration. So there are recipes that I can share, and it's a loosey-goosey version of like what she made and what we ate. But I also have some of my own recipes that I want to share this week. So cottage cheese pancakes are a go-to
ooh,
for me. I will triple this batch, and I'm going to recommend that you do the same. Triple this batch. It will take you a little bit longer to make all of these pancakes, but they freeze phenomenally, and they are a lifesaver for breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
mm.
Like if I've got a handful of these in the freezer, I'll use them for kind of any meal that I want a convenient thing for. They're so packed with protein. Between the cottage cheese and the number of eggs that are in this recipe, they are super filling, super tasty, kind of crunchy on the outside, fluffy on the inside. They're
Mm.
really
Okay,
phenomenal.
yeah, I'm
So I've
definitely gonna
linked
try.
to the one that I make anytime I ever have guests in town and I make them. Everybody asks for this recipe. So this is one you need. Okay. I also am making smoothies for myself every day.
Always.
Yeah. So even though Linda's in the back alley bistro, I'm still making smoothies. Now, I really couldn't find a smoothie recipe similar to what I make.
She Shuha read it. She's
Turns out.
transcended green smoothies.
Yeah. I'll give you the rundown, but what I've linked is for a green smoothie, and it does sound really yummy, and it's somewhat similar, although I don't ever put dairy or peanut butter or like almond butter into my smoothies. It is something I want to try. I just don't do it. Mine is typically spinach, carrots, ginger, cucumber, celery, apple, orange, handful of frozen berries, coconut water, ice. So that's the actual recipe, if you can remember that in your noggin. But there's also a link to another type of smoothie you can try out. And then we had fish tacos. They were not made by me, but the recipe that I've linked is kind of the most similar thing to what Linda at the Back Alley Bistro made.
Mm,
And they were fantastic.
I love fish
So light and
tacos.
fresh with that nice like aioli on them and a cabbage slaw.
Those are the
Just
two
so
things that
good.
make it. You could even just buy like a frozen like fried fish.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're short on time, you don't want to
Yeah.
do it. That's what I would do.
And an aioli is very simple to
So
make.
easy.
It's mayo, water, sriracha, salt, maybe a little bit of lime juice.
Done.
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 All right, let's get to the listener question. Okay, so this one is asking us about HELOCs, home equity lines of credit. They say good, bad, necessary evil, avoid at all costs, use sparingly, home equity loan, good idea or not, and or other options for financing, remodels, or bigger purchases.
Okay, so a lot in here, but basically the question is HELOC versus home equity loan. HELOC is home equity line of credit versus home equity loan. So let's get in. We will also link to a article that kind of like text-based like explains this more, but we will give you our interpretation and what we think. So first, home equity loan. If you're doing a renovation or an addition, this is probably the most frequent one that you will think about or come to. Home equity loans are also known as a second mortgage. You are taking out a lump sum based on the equity of your home. You have to have at least 20% equity, but you will only be able to take out 70 to 85% of that equity. So it's not of the value of your home, it's percentage of the equity in your home. And you get the money in a lump sum. It's a fixed rate and then a fixed monthly payment. So just like a personal loan, but it is backed not by, I don't know what personal loans are backed by, but this loan is backed by your home.
Mhm.
And that's why you can take out so much more. And that's why people will do it for renovations, upgrades, additions.
Mhm. Whereas a home equity line of credit, while similar to a home equity loan in that you're borrowing kind of against your home, you're utilizing the equity of your home to kind of secure the loan. It works different from a loan in that it's a line of credit that is available to you. So it's a specified amount that you could take out on kind of a revolving basis. And for that reason, the interest rate might end up varying over time. So, usually it'll be a line of credit that you have access to up to a certain amount on a revolving basis for usually about 10 years. Once that 10-year period ends, that's when it's then amortized and you kind of come across your monthly repayments for that loan and when a rate is kind of settled upon. For a home equity line of credit, your rate could be even lower. Your interest rate could be even lower than a home equity loan, but you don't necessarily have access to that whole lump sum all at once, which might be why, like, you might choose the loan instead. You can figure out exactly what the interest rate is going to be versus kind of the revolving amount, but you also have the choice to not use the entire amount that is available to you.
Yeah, it's right now, home equity loans and lines of credit are hovering around 8% interest. So definitely lower than a credit card, lower than a personal loan, but more than a car. So when we were renovating our home that we bought our house to fix up. We also needed to upgrade our car. And so we decided to use the money we had for the house because those loans are higher interest. And then we took out an auto loan for the car because those were lower
Lower, okay.
interest.
At the time.
Yeah, still. I mean,
Uh-huh.
you can still get auto loans for
That's
less than
true, yeah.
8%. So if you're doing like a 2-year renovation, you're more probably more beneficial to do the home equity loan. Now we'll get to what we really feel about these, but just in hypotheticals, it's usually more advantageous to do the loan because you're locking in that interest rate versus if you were to get these things at, different periods of time, you could risk having a higher interest rate. So
Mhm.
that's just like hypothetical. For both, this is what both have in common. If you miss a payment or you start getting behind on payments, it's not just your credit score that's at risk, it's your home. So it's very dangerous in that sense. Like a home equity loan is considered a second mortgage. And if you stop paying that mortgage payment, you don't have the house anymore.
Mhm.
So they're very dangerous in that
I
sense.
also learned in reading about home equity loans that because it's considered like a second mortgage, not only is there an interest rate that's charged on that loan, but a lot of times closing costs,
Right, of 2 to
like 2 to
5%.
5%.
Mhm.
Yeah. 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 That's crazy. Yeah. So the reason that most people would do this is for home repairs, for maybe some large unexpected expenses, but usually it's kind of remodeling, maybe education costs, like to pay for a kid's college. Would be the choice. I'm sure that there are people who do this for funding a vacation. Absolutely would not recommend that because there really are risks with this. The interest rate isn't entirely that low, and like you said, you are borrowing against your house. It's against the equity that you already have in that home, but people can find themselves upside down in this situation if for whatever reason the value of the home drops and you owe more on your home than what the value actually is. And I actually know many people personally who this has happened to. It feels like, no, a home is secure. You're never going to dip in value. But I have seen people who have lived in their homes for 25, 30 years. They take out second mortgages, sometimes multiple times, and end up paying more over the course of time than what their house was ever worth. And
Mhm.
that's just a really crummy place to be in.
Yeah. So, what do we think? So, I'll give my opinion home equity lines of credit, HELOCs, you're seeing ads for them everywhere. It's probably why you asked this question, because there are just ads for them everywhere. Everyone's talking because people since 2020, they have more equity in their homes than they ever thought they would have over 5 years, right? Equity has just gone bananas. And so now we're seeing all these ads from companies telling people, oh my gosh, you have all this equity, like get a home equity line of credit, essentially to use as an emergency fund for your house, which is such a bad idea. You should have an emergency fund, and that emergency fund is for across the board. So car, medical, home, whatever. That's what you should really have. You shouldn't be using a home equity line of credit because that tempts you to spend money you actually don't have. I will say I feel slightly differently about a home equity loan. So HELOCs, I don't like. I just don't like them. And this is my opinion. Everyone can have their own opinion. For a home equity loan, in our area and a lot of areas, housing has become unaffordable. And I know a lot of people who bought their homes as starter homes, right? Did the right thing, got a, starter home, and now have outgrown their home or never intended to stay there.
Yeah.
They just bought what they can afford so that they could, get more equity and then upgrade. And now those upgrades are unaffordable. They cannot, move unless they wanted to move out the city. So what I've seen people do is when moving houses has become unaffordable, then they will use a home equity loan to then build onto their house. Or I know people who wanted to get into real estate investing, but now that is unaffordable in this area. So instead of spending $400,000 on an income property, they have built an ADU in their backyard for $200,000, which was more affordable for them, and have used a home equity loan in order to do that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to, there are actually probably more affordable like building loans for something like that. But for renovations, I had, maybe didn't plan to stay in the house, wanted to upgrade, and instead now we're going to stay long term and we're just going to renovate. So using it for something like that when the plan has shifted in that way, I don't disagree with that. But those are unique circumstances. And I wouldn't use it to pay for kids' college.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't do it for vanity remodels. Like those things you can remodel at an affordable rate. If
don't take it out to install a pool. Like some of these more like luxury things. You kind of really want to think about really. I think you're kind of hearing from us. We're a little bit more like risk averse when it comes to that kind of a thing.
Like we did our whole 5-bedroom, 3-bath home.
Yeah.
Used all our own cash just over time to renovate that.
Yeah.
And then chose an auto loan because it was a lower rate. So ideally, that would be my choice.
The housing market, our streams of income can be more volatile than we would like to admit. And so when we are taking out these large sums of money against the roof over our heads, it is worth a pause. But still worth noting that we believe debt is neutral. And we do think that there are ways that we can engage with debt eyes wide open in a way that actually does set us up for a better financial future. And so I think with some of the examples that you gave, if it's between staying where we are and getting a low interest loan on our house to make our house what we need, or buying a brand new home and spending, so much more money or having a higher interest rate, then it actually is the smarter move to get the home equity loan, to do the things, and to remain where you are for a longer amount of time. More money will be saved, more money might be able to be invested as a result. So really, there's a very individualized, nuanced conversation that does need to happen. But overarching, we want to say, press pause, definitely educate yourself, run the numbers, do what makes sense for you, and ideally build up that emergency fund so that you don't need to borrow against your housing situation in order to pay for, a catastrophic event or even just maintenance on your house.
Yeah, if you're doing a renovation that you knew you were going to have to do when you bought the house, save up for it. But if you never planned to do that and now you're priced out of the market, like that happened to you and now you have to pivot, yeah, like buying a new house, we're still at like a 7% interest rate and hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what the budget should be, right? So,
Yeah.
like, some of those unforeseen things you just can't, you can't change. So,
Yeah.
yeah, think wisely about like, do I need more room? Do I actually need more room?
Mm.
What can I get rid of to make more space in this house? Like, what kind of furniture, toys, tables? Like, what can I get rid of to give me more space? What can I alter?
Mhm.
So, think critically first about whether you need extra room before obviously you take out any debt.
Thanks so much for being here with us. We put out videos like this, the Sunday Reset, every single Sunday. So hit the subscribe button so that you are notified of those changes. Feel free to leave us some comments on your thoughts, kind of how you approach these different ideas, what recipes you loved, or what you're cooking this week. We'd love to engage with you, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.